Welcome to Defeat PPD, where we empower women to overcome anxiety and depression in motherhood without medication. I'm Arielle Wozniak, and I am a maternal mental wellness coach, and I will be leading you through this journey. Hello. This is your host, Arielle Wozniak. Welcome back to Defeat PPD. Today is episode number 62. And I'm recording at night, so hopefully the lighting stays this bright throughout, but if it doesn't, you'll have to forgive me. And if you're listening on a podcast listening platform, you may be asking, what light is she talking about? We cannot see her. I am currently in the process of video recording all of my podcasts, and they will be available on YouTube for this year. So you have the option of seeing me while I chat with you, or just listening on your radio or your phone or whatever works for you. So listen where you can. But I'm really excited to talk to you guys today, and I feel like I say that every time, but I am genuinely excited to get to share these topics with you. These are things that I feel would have been so helpful to me as I was really struggling with postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety. And so that's why I get passionate about sharing these topics. And today I want to talk about something that I feel like is not talked about enough. And that is having depression while you are pregnant, or having anxiety while you are pregnant. And this episode is not specifically about having anxiety and depression like outside of pregnancy and motherhood and all of that. This is like you developed depression or anxiety with pregnancy. So that's specifically what we're talking about today. But some of the principles can apply to all situations with depression and anxiety. So definitely continue listening in. And as always, I want to remind you that I do have a free toolkit with some of the resources that I have found to be the most helpful to me throughout my journey. And you can get those by going to my website, that is defeatppd.com. Did you see that look on my face? For a second, I was like, what is my website? But defeatppd.com. You can go there. When you sign up for the mailing list, you automatically get that free toolkit, which has, I believe it's 6 different resources that I've included in there that were just really beyond helpful to me. So that's just my little reminder to you before we go ahead and dive in. But and today we are talking about depression and anxiety in pregnancy. So as always for now with these video episodes, you may see my notes kind of pop in from time to time, but yeah, just want to make sure I hit all of the talking points. So what is depression and anxiety in pregnancy? Like, is that even a thing? Honestly, I had never heard about it until I personally experienced it. And so I didn't really know that it was common for women to experience anxiety or depression with the kind of onset of pregnancy. But that was most definitely my story with my first son. So if you've listened to podcasts previously, you may have heard some parts of this, but when I got pregnant for that first time with my son, it was not planned. Like, my plan in life, which I had it all planned out, it didn't go according to my plan. My plan was climbing the corporate ladder, just being super successful in that realm. I had no intention of getting married. I had no intention of having children. Like, those were not in my plan. And clearly you see me today as a maternal mental wellness coach and a mom and a wife of 3. So my plans didn't go according to plan. But when I got pregnant for that first time with my son, it was just like, it rocked my world. And if you haven't read my bio, I go into detail about that experience and really what that brought me to. But because I had in my mind like this perfect plan of where I was planning to go with my life and the things I would do and what I would accomplish, and realized that my reality was starting to separate from what it was that I had planned, I spiraled into depression. And I thought, okay, maybe this is just a me thing. maybe I'm the only person who has experienced depression or anxiety with the onset of pregnancy. But in researching it, I found that there were so many other women who were experiencing what I was experiencing. And the crazy part about it is that when I was actually going through what I now know to be prenatal depression, my doctor didn't tell me anything about it. Like, he did not even mention that prenatal depression was a thing. And so kind of how this came about, I was really experiencing a lot of like depression. I was just really down. I wasn't motivated. I didn't feel like doing the things that I had once felt like doing. And if you've been pregnant, you're probably like, I mean, that was me too. But no, it was like to the nth degree. And what I mean by that is that I loved working. Like, I literally loved working. As I said, I wanted to just continue climbing the corporate ladder and be as successful as possible. Side story here, when I was in college, one of my professors had us do like a little introduction. Why did I say introduction like that? Had us do a little introduction to the class of who we were, and we had to bring in 3 things that represent us. And one of the things that I brought in was a $20 bill, because I said success represents me. So yeah, that's where my mindset was. And I loved working and just being super passionate about my work and what I got to do every day. But when I was pregnant, I no longer even felt like inspired by the work that I was doing. Mind you, I had just loved that work not even a month earlier. And it was just like things no longer held the same meaning that they held prior to being depressed or being anxious. And I brought this up to my doctor, and he essentially just kind of chalked it up to hormones and like everything's fine, you know, like no big deal here. And that was kind of it. It wasn't until I started to experience some of the more scary symptoms that he seemed a little bit more alarmed. But even at that point, he didn't treat it as if it was something that was somewhat normal. He treated it as if it was like this really abnormal thing and I was the only person going through it. And that made me feel even worse about the situation. But in the research that I've done, it turns out that there are over 7% of women who experience prenatal depression. And they may not sound like a lot, but when you multiply that times the amount of women who are pregnant every single year, there's a good group of us. There are a lot of us women who experience prenatal depression, and it's just not something that you're constantly hearing about. Some people have never even heard the term prenatal depression. And that was me. I didn't know it was a thing. And so here I was thinking that like, I am just going crazy. There's something wrong with me. Why am I feeling like this when I'm pregnant? And there's so many other women who would love to be in my place and would love to be carrying this child. And here I am being ungrateful and all that stuff that I just kind of talked down to myself. But I really should have shown myself some grace in that period, because it's normal. So if you are someone who is watching or listening today and you are experiencing prenatal depression, there is nothing wrong with you. It is normal. And if nothing else, if you take nothing else away from this episode, I want you to take that away. Just know that your feelings and your emotions and the things that you're going through, like, that does not make you crazy. You are still completely normal, whatever that means, because we're all a little crazy. But prenatal depression can really go undiagnosed. So like all forms of depression and anxiety, prenatal depression can go unnoticed from the outside. So no one really, like, within my circle noticed that I was going through this really traumatic experience. No one noticed that I was depressed or that I was more anxious than normal. Like, it was just kind of unnoticed. It was assumed that all of these things just kind of go hand in hand with being pregnant. Oh, you're feeling a little bit anxious. I mean, it's just probably the hormones surging through your body. Oh, you're a little bit down. it's got to be the hormones, no worries. And so I didn't really know that I needed to be getting any sort of support or help or anything like that, because I didn't know it was really like an issue, if that makes sense. And so my story is a little bit of a longer story, but what ended up happening is my husband and I, we relocated from Connecticut to Georgia in the middle of being pregnant, finding a new doctor, and that just being a stressful experience kind of in itself, and then starting to experience even more of these sorts of symptoms, if you will. And so what ended up happening is I would have like these intrusive thoughts. And if you don't know what intrusive thoughts are, they're essentially unwanted, usually like sort of scary or frightening thoughts that worry you. And so I would have these intrusive thoughts of me just like driving off the side of the road, or of me like jumping down from, and it sounds crazy now, but jumping down from this like little stool that I had at work and like hurting myself or something, or hurting the baby. And these thoughts would be playing through my head. And I mentioned it to my doctor, and he said that I needed to go to the ER and essentially just get like a mental eval. And so I went to the ER and had that mental evaluation. And upon telling the specialist, I don't even know what he was, just after telling him what I was experiencing, he's like, oh no, like you need to, get treated and be on medication or whatever it is. But no one that entire time mentioned prenatal depression as something that exists, and never was therapy talked about or anything else like that. It was just like, oh no, intrusive thoughts. I mean, we've got to just put you kind of away in a corner. And because there's only 7% of women, and I say only now, but thinking about the greater picture here, but there's 7% of us that are struggling with this, and many people do not speak up or say anything because they are afraid. They're afraid that people will think that they're crazy, or afraid that someone will judge them, or that they'll have to go to an insane asylum, or whatever it is that your fear might be. And so a lot of times women will not speak up about it, but we need to, because there's power in knowing and in knowledge that this is something that is normal. You are not crazy. And I so wish that I had someone to tell me that when I was just like at my wit's end. And so it ended up being like this really rough time for me. And so that person who did the mental evaluation, he's like, oh, you definitely need to get help and blah, blah, blah. We recommend you come to our facility. Don't do that. But so my husband spoke to him, and he was like, hey, I'll watch over her. I'll be her caretaker, and you don't have to worry about any of that. And because of that experience, I actually had to go out on short-term disability while being pregnant because of all of this like depression and this anxiety and just like the toxic thoughts that I was thinking. And it was a terrible time. And I really just wish that I knew then what I know now. I wish that I knew that prenatal depression is something that happens, and it's something that's treatable. And there are things that you can do that don't necessarily require you going to some sort of institution or taking medication or whatever other scary scenario you want to insert there. But there are things that you can do that are natural and holistic, and would just allow you to still have that time with your family and not be away and all those things. So I just want to give you some tips about managing prenatal depression medication free, which is what I was able to do. And so my hope is that these tips will help you in your life, and that you don't have to experience the terrible stuff that I had to experience, and that prenatal depression is a thing. It's common. I'm normal. Here's what I do. So let's talk about the actual action part, what you should do. I want to share these 3 tips with you, and I have them written down. So if you see me looking down, that's why. But number 1, this is the thing that I feel like changes everything for me, is to actually speak out and share what's going on in your life. And I know that sounds probably like, oh, well, I mean, you shared with your doctor, so how is that any different? What I'm talking about is sharing with people in your life that care for you, sharing with your community. The second time around when I went through like postpartum depression after having Kyla, I shared that entire journey with my small group, and that was the biggest blessing in all of that pain and chaos, because I had so many people who rallied around me, people who prayed for me, people who would just call me, text me, bring me over food, and could sit there in the silence and in that pain and tension and just be like, I'm here for you. So many people who offered to help in multiple ways by caring for our children or whatever it might have been. I had an army of people the second time I went through postpartum depression. The first time in going through prenatal depression and postpartum depression with my first child, I didn't have any support, not from my community. And that's because I didn't share it. No one knew what I was actually going through. I would put on a brave face whenever I had to go back to work. I put on a brave face when I went out to events or to church or anywhere you saw me. You didn't know that I had just been like in my room crying on the floor or really stressed out, having these really like anxious and intrusive thoughts. Like, you would not have known because I didn't share that journey with anyone. But I would strongly recommend that you share your journey. And I know right now, being in kind of these COVID times where you're not really seeing people in person, it's a little bit different, but social media is a great way to do that. And I did that again with Kyla. I started to share my story on social media and tell people what it was that I was going through and how I was struggling. And honestly, the messages that I got and people who I hadn't talked to in years reaching out to me, like, that support was really so helpful. So that is my my number one tip is to share this journey with your community. Even if it's just virtually, share the journey. It will be worth it for you. And I know that that's scary, or at least it was scary for me. Can't speak for everyone. But it's scary to think that people might judge you, or when they hear that you have intrusive thoughts, they might think that, oh, she's a crazy one. But that's not the case. And that was not my experience. Never has anyone to my face called me crazy or anything like that. But it's always just been like, how can I support you? What are you going through? Like, just really, really helpful. So share your journey. That first time, like, I truly felt alone. I felt like no one understood me and no one cared to understand me. But it wasn't that no one understood or cared to understand. It was that I didn't take the time or the effort to tell anyone what I was going through. Number 2 is getting support for your thinking. And I don't know if I'm saying that right, but like, getting some support to help you change the way that you think. And you can do that in a number of different ways. If you download the Toolkit, there is one of the tools that's in there. It's called a thought capturer. And that's, to me, that has been the most helpful way of changing the way that I think and the way that my mind works. It's really this process of like retraining your brain. And so that's one thing that you can do. Another thing that you can do is to go to therapy, get a counselor or a therapist, and have someone that you can talk that out with, and someone who understands. This is important. Someone who understands what you're actually going through. You don't want to go to some therapist who immediately, as soon as they hear intrusive thoughts, is going to say like, you need some help with that, because intrusive thoughts come along with other mental, I don't like calling it illnesses, but other mental things. And so sometimes I feel like people get a little bit scared talking about intrusive thoughts, and obviously they have like certain liabilities and all those things. So just make sure you get you someone who understands what it is that you're actually going through. If you have someone who specializes in prenatal and postpartum depression, absolutely, I would 100% recommend that you work with someone like that. Unfortunately, it's not available in everyone's area. I know here in the Atlanta area, we have plenty of resources like that, but just not the case all across the US. But if you can, that's like the best type of individual to work with, is someone who understands specifically what it is that you are going through. And so that could be, like I said, therapy, but then the other option is coaching. This is exactly what I do. I know how it is to be in your shoes. I know what it feels like to feel like you're going crazy or to feel like you're just not yourself. I know, I've been there. I've walked through that. And so that's what I coach women to go through. I teach you how to actually transform your thinking and be able to still live a fulfilled life despite having the experience that you're having with postpartum depression or prenatal depression or whatever you want to label it as. That's what I do. And so you could find a coach who specializes in that. Either way, get support for your mental well-being. It is going to be life-changing. And don't do what I did, because I went to a therapist, but every session, I literally sat in her couch. She had like this little black couch that you sit on, and she would ask me a question and I would give like a one-word answer. Be like, yes, no, I don't know. Or if it's something like really detailed, I would just be like, shrug my shoulders. I don't have an answer for you. As if she was like getting something out of our sessions. Like, it's the wildest thing. Like, the sessions are for you. So if you do decide to go to therapy, actually crack open the shell and just pour it all out so that they can help you and see how it is that you're currently thinking and how they can help you to transform that way of thinking. So that's tip number 2. And then number 3 is to focus on nutrition. There's a lot of different ways that you can go about this, but I would say keep it as simple as possible, because when you're experiencing depression or anxiety, you may not necessarily have the same level of motivation that you typically would have. And so you don't want to go out and try to get on like a keto plan or something really intense where you got to follow all these rules. But kind of my rule of thumb is to focus on your water intake. You should always be drinking half of your body weight in ounces. So if you weigh 160 pounds, then you should be drinking like 80 ounces a day or whatever that is. And you may need more water than that, but really focus on making sure you're getting enough fluid into your body. And then focus on foods that are like fruits and vegetables and those sort of things, which I know is difficult when you're pregnant and having all these cravings and all that stuff, but this really will help you. And then another thing that I've included in my toolkit are some of like the nutritional supplements that I found to be helpful. These are all things that you'd want to work with your doctor on, making sure that you are approved to take those during pregnancy. But those nutritional supplements were hugely beneficial to me. And so I would recommend like at least looking at that list and see if there are any of those things that you can start to put into your diet. And really, one of the other things that I would recommend is to focus on like your gut health. And you can do that again in a number of ways, but a quick Google search will give you plenty of information on how to do this in the most simple way. So nutrition is important, but I wouldn't want you to get hung up on nutrition and like start to feel like you have to obsess about that and you can't eat certain things and all those things. Like, that is not the goal. The goal would be for you to eat healthy so that your brain has the nutrition within your body that it needs to operate at its optimal level. Because when you're experiencing depression or anxiety, like that's when you need it the most. And then you may also want to look into like omega-3s and those sort of things, which I'm happy to chat with anyone about. Always feel free to reach out to me, info@defeatppd.com, and I would be happy to kind of talk to you about some of these things and different supplements that you may want to consider. But again, get the toolkit, because in that toolkit, I have a lot of that information there and explain some of the actual nutritional supplements that I would recommend. So, distracted easily. But like I was saying, focusing on nutrition, that's going to be really like hugely important to you. And it's not just about you. If it's like during pregnancy and you're experiencing all this, you have another body growing within you. And so you have to make sure you have enough nutrition to support that, because more now than ever, you have like someone else depending on you. And so you want to make sure that you're getting the nutrition in your body that you need. And my children have literally just gotten home and they're probably about to start streaming, and that's what distracted me before. And so that kind of wraps up everything that I would recommend you focus on if you're experiencing prenatal depression or anxiety. Again, share this with your community. Share your experience with those people around you, people who love you and can support you, and get the mental support that you need, either through therapy or through a coach. And then just focus on your nutrition. Again, keep it simple. You do not want to overcomplicate this, because then you won't end up following through with it. It has to be simple enough that you can continue on with it. And so, yeah, prenatal depression, it's a thing. And it is common. You are not alone in this experience. It does not make you crazy or any less than a person. And it is something that is highly, highly treatable without medication. And so that's all I've got for you today. Again, if you want to reach out to me, info@defeatppd.com. That's info@defeatppd.com. And if you want to if you want to get your hands on the resource that I talked about throughout this episode, my toolkit, it's completely free. And you can get it on my website at defeatppd.com. All right, well, I will see you all on the next episode. Have a great rest of your day.